Hi everyone, this is Stephen Adams, and welcome back to this wealthy education video on advanced technical analysis. Today we are going to be talking about the Average Directional Index. This is another of our trend analysis indicators, and is the last one we'll be talking about in Module 2. So the Average Directional Index provides a measurement of the strength of a trend. The ADX ranges from 0 to 100. 0 to 25 means that the trend is weak or that there's no trend in place. 25 to 50 means there's a strong trend in place. 50 to 75 means a very strong trend. And 75 to 100 is an extremely strong trend. It's rare to see a number in the 75 to 100 range. You won't see numbers very often in the 50 to 75 range, and most of the numbers you'll see on the ADX are in the 25 to 50 range or the 0 to 25 range, depending on whether or not the stock is trending. A rising ADX indicates that the trend is strong, while a declining ADX indicates a weakening trend. The trend can be either a bullish trend or a bearish trend. It's important to understand this. The ADX can be rising in a bearish trend, and that indicates that the bearish trend is getting stronger. So don't get the ADX confused with the MACD or other indicators that rise and fall in bullish and bearish trends. The ADX is just indicating a trend is strong. That can be a bullish or a bearish trend. So when the ADX changes direction, you have a rising ADX and then it begins to fall. That does not mean that the stock is moving from a bullish trend to a bearish trend or a bearish trend to a bullish trend. It just means that whatever trend the stock is currently in is becoming weaker. And for that reason, we want to use the ADX with another indicator, such as the MACD, that tells us what type of trend the stock is in. Obviously, you can look at price action to see what the trend is, but with the ADX, more so than any other indicator, you definitely want to use it with another indicator, which is showing you trend direction and possible changes in trend direction. So with that, let's take a look at the ADX on a chart. Let's use a chart of Microsoft to show how the ADX indicator works. First, we're going to go to the top of the chart under indicators. We're going to type in average, and we see the Average Directional Index. And now we're going to add in the MACD, because again, we always use a trend direction indicator with the ADX. And we're going to add in the MACD there. Now this is a daily chart of Microsoft, and we can see from first looking at the MACD back in October of 17, the MACD is in a bullish pattern. You have it rising, dipping, but staying bullish, and then rising again. And we can see from our ADX, which has topped over 40, we're looking at around almost 50 on the ADX, that the stock is in a very strong trend to the upside. The ADX then turns down. Our MACD is still bullish, but what the ADX is telling us here, as it moves down, is that the trend is becoming weaker. So the MACD is still bullish, as I said, but that bullish trend is weaker. And we can see Microsoft bumping up against resistance at several levels here as the ADX is declining. So the ADX begins to rise again and gets above the 25 level in July. And we can see the stock rising with it, and we see the MACD rising as well. The MACD is bullish here. We've got a crossover, which is a buy signal, in early July. And the stock moves above 100 at that point, up to 110, which is also the peak of our ADX. And at that point, the ADX again begins to decline. When the ADX is declining, again, that does not mean that there is a change in direction for the stock. It simply means that the trend is weaker. And we can see that the stock continues to move up just above 115 for a little less than a 5% gain. But as the stock is moving up, we see the MACD continuing to be in the bullish range. Now let's zoom in and look at an hourly chart of the ADX. So using our daily chart, we know that the stock has turned to a bearish. We get a sell signal and the MACD has turned bearish. So now we're going to look at a possible bearish trend in Microsoft using the ADX and the MACD. So let's look on our hourly chart, and we're looking to go short the stock now that we believe it's in a bearish trend. We got a sell signal here and the ADX moving up to tell us that that trend is increasing, and you can see a pretty strong move down on the hourly chart. From this 115 level, the stock moves down to 106, and you see the ADX remaining above the 25 level up to around 40 at this point. So that indicated that this bearish trend was strong. But now we see the ADX starting to turn. And let's zoom into the 15-minute chart, and we can see this is that trend, that bearish trend. The ADX was high at this point, but now the ADX is moving down. And what that's telling us, I'll draw this line with the ADX is moving down at this point. What that trend in the ADX is telling us is that the bearish trend is getting weaker. And we're getting confirmation from that with the MACD, which has gone to a slightly bullish position. Now, the way we would trade this is if we had a short position on from our daily chart, believing that the stock is in a bearish trend now, as the ADX comes down here and begins to decline, we would move our stops closer to cover our short position. If our trading plan is to trade a trending stock, we've captured gains in our short position, but now our stock trend is beginning to disappear. So instead of holding that short position, as I said, we're going to move our stops in pretty close so that we can still capture gains to the downside. But if the stock moves up, which it did here from this 106 level, we're going to cover that short position because we no longer have a strongly trending stock. So we use the different time frames to tell us when to move our stop in closer. As we can see, the MACD had us in a bearish short position, and the MACD hasn't turned to a buy yet, but we're not going to wait for the MACD to turn. We're going to look, as I said, at the ADX in the shorter time frame, and as it's declining, that's going to tell us to move our stops closer. So a great way to use the ADX is with a trailing stop, and it can tell you that your trend is weakening in whichever direction you're trading, so you can get out of your position. This does a couple of things. It keeps you from losing money as the trend possibly reverses, and it allows you to free up capital and move on to another trade when your stock is no longer trending in the direction you want, and you're not squandering your resources staying in one trade when you could move on to another stock that is trending. So that's the ADX applied to a chart of Microsoft. Thank you for watching this video on the ADX. In our next video, we'll be moving on to the next module in the course where we will be talking about volatility indicators. In our first video, we'll be talking about Bollinger Bands. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.